Hi, it's Dwyer, always 1776.com, also gamblersadvisory.com. Today is October 25th, 2025. Let's throw out a few ideas to address some of the concerns people have about the artificial intelligence space and the vendor financing that's taking place, the duplicative deals that are taking place in that space. But first, remember, nothing I say in this video should be construed as investment advice. If I mention a stock, your operating assumption should be I either own it or am considering owning it. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, folks, you know the way record companies and venture capitalists operate, right? You don't know which musical group is going to resonate with the public. You don't know who the public is going to pick as the winner in the space. So record companies will invest in multiple groups, will take out options on groups, right? If we like how your first album performed, then we'll fund a second album. If we don't, then we'll part and you can go on your own way, right? The reason's simple. The public makes decisions that sometimes are unexpected, that might not track technology. Right? Years ago, you had Betamax, a more advanced technology than VHS, which was easier to use. The public chose VHS, not Betamax, the more advanced technology. Right? The reality is we don't know who the winners are, even when the technology looks promising. So the reality with AI is that it's new. Certain companies look better positioned than others, right? NVIDIA certainly looks better positioned than others in the chip making space. Each participant has their own, realm of expertise. So, folks, in a world where there's market consolidation, right? New York City, for example, used to have far more newspapers than there are now, right? When desktop computers became a thing, there were many desktop computer companies. They consolidated, right? Laptop computers, same thing. They consolidated. The AI space, folks, not everyone's going to make it. That's the reality, right? In the moment, we're thinking that this is new technology. There are cults around individual leaders, and you think, oh, he's so smart and stuff like that, right? Just understand education, well, not education, intelligence, in a sense, is a commodity. By that I mean at a certain level of execution, and the execution is going to continue to get better and better and better as the technology matures. But at a certain point, one would imagine the information I'm going to get from Grok should mirror the information I get from Google, Gemini AI. And it should mirror the information I get from Microsoft Copilot. In other words, at a certain point, we're going to hit a certain level where the quality of the AI portals should start to cancel each other out. Right? Different companies, too, are going to have different issues. Right? Because at the end of the day, some are using different chips. Corporate decisions are going to be made to pursue certain, product lines or paths, and they're going to fail. So here's what I think we know, right? And this is the nature of capitalism. You're going to have a lot of creative destruction, right? These AI companies right now are fiercely competing with each other, right? They're throwing billions of dollars into development. They're ramping up, right? There's some mild changes, right? Some mild differences. OpenAI is talking about the possibility of having erotica in its AI portal and things like that. Right? Now, if you're in the space, if you're one of the participants, and you need to use chips, right? And you don't want to be too dependent on NVIDIA, which right now is the Goliath in chips. Then you might want to diversify. Have a deal with NVIDIA, but also have a deal with Google, who makes its own chips. Amazon, who makes its own chips. Right? The feeling, just like in crypto, is that you don't want a single point of failure. You also don't want to give a business partner too much power over your operation. You have another concern too. You don't know who's going to stay in the space. Right? If AI doesn't work out for a Goliath, let's say Amazon can say, okay, well, we're going to focus on our other business lines. Right? They have a retail business, folks. They have, a online computing business. Right? They have other business lines. So let me just say, you have a lot of pundits here online, and they're saying, wow, look at this. You have, NVIDIA making a deal with OpenAI, where OpenAI is being fronted chips and hardware, isn't paying for it. This must be to goose the books, as if NVIDIA needs to goose their books, given all their profits, right? This is leading to accounting distortions that might mislead investors, and there must be some gimmick to this. Folks, maybe there's not a gimmick. Maybe NVIDIA looks at OpenAI and thinks, you know what, they're promising. OpenAI looks at NVIDIA and says, player, we're not even public yet. We can't afford all these chips. NVIDIA looks over at their competition and says to itself, we want to ingratiate ourselves right now as OpenAI is getting its footing. We want to solidify their use of us and our chips for their business. So, understanding that there's going to be consolidation in the space. Right? We're going to tell them, hey, we'll do vendor financing. Not to distort our accounting books, not to get some short bump up in our profitability to lure in more investors. Maybe the thinking's different. Maybe the thinking is simply, let's solidify our business relationships, so if you are one of the survivors in this artificial intelligence space, we'll have something solid, right? We'll, give you the chips with the understanding that you're going to pay us for them if your business survives. Right? It's alluring to you. We're going to leverage what we have. Right? The fact that we're giving you the chips without you giving us any money up front gives your business a better chance to survive. And hopefully you'll remember that as the AI space contracts in terms of the number of players, even if the market proves itself to be sustainable long term. Right? So I just want people to think about all the laptop manufacturers there were. Think about all the browsers, Netscape browser, for example, that didn't make it over the years. Right? In business, when you have a situation where you have several well-funded participants and you have a realization that the market, consumers, are going to pick winners and that there'll be losers for whatever reason, right? Then you need to realize why there's duplication, why some of these AI companies are getting chips from more than one entity, right? You need to understand why, OpenAI has gone out of its way to reduce its dependence on Microsoft, for example. Right? Why, Anthropic has relationships with multiple parties that seem to duplicate each other. Right? You just have to anticipate what's coming down the pike. The players themselves aren't going to tell you that the market's going to consolidate and that only a few will be left standing. Right? I myself, looking at AI, right? And I have some money invested in some of the players. Looking at AI, I myself wonder, how is a participant going to get a competitive advantage? Right? Again, as the market matures, I'm expecting the quality of the results from questions made to the AI portals to start to mirror each other. Right? Even the, text to video features. I'm expecting the videos to start to reach a certain level of quality that mirrors each other. Right? The market's going to pick a Coca-Cola of the group. Right? Years ago, we would say a Hertz of the group. They'll pick an Avis of the group. Right? They might go further and pick a number 3 and a number 4, just like travelers over time pick their favorite airline. And you go to the airport and you understand this airline is going to have a lot of terminals at the airport because this airline is popular. They're going to have a lot of routes throughout the United States. Then you have lesser airlines who are more local, more regional, right? Why? In part because the public didn't pick them to be the big national airlines. It's just like sports leagues. You watch a United Football League game and you understand you're not watching the NFL. Right? Over time, the public picked the NFL. Right? It didn't pick Canadian football in terms of, the biggest primary player in the space. It picked the National Football League. In AI, things will sort themselves out, right? I'm sure there's going to be some dominant AI group, right? And then there's going to be, plan B, plan C, plan D, right? That's how it's going to shake out. So it's so early right now in the AI space. Anthropic, private. Open AI, private. Right? Not all of the players are even public players. Right? XAI, isn't that still private? Right? So, of course, it's early, so the contracts are duplicative. So the deep-pocketed players who want to ingratiate themselves, right? NVIDIA with its GPUs, they're, going out of their way to make sure they get their product out there to more than one market player, because they don't know how many of their business partners are going to survive. Right? That's the reality. So let's, as we listen to all these videos online, including mine, right? Let's not jump to the worst conclusion. Right? I think the worst conclusion is this idea that, there's something nefarious going on, and that, this is a Ponzi scheme, and it's going to come tumbling down. Maybe the duplication, OpenAI using chips from more than one group, right? Maybe the duplication is actually a survival technique. So if you are supplied by more than one chip manufacturer, right? If you're using more than one cloud computing outfit, if one goes under or withdraws from the space, you're good. Right? That's what duplication can give you. Maybe the motive is not misleading investors and things like that. Keep in mind, too, for a company that hasn't yet gone public, that would be one of the stupidest things they could do, because their books are going to be scrutinized when they go public. Right? And so you don't want to have sham transactions and stuff like that. Right? Let me also say, too, it's a mistake to look at 2000 and say, oh, look, the internet crashed. All these internet stocks crashed. That was a bubble. Right? You need to recognize that that's the way markets work. Right? Look at the gas stations in your neighborhood. Right? You might notice that there are some A-level gas stations, right? Some national brands, and then you have Lonnie's local station, right? You have these cheaper gas stations that seem to only be in your neighborhood and maybe, poorer neighborhoods throughout the area, right? Well, just understand, it's a jungle out there, right? There's consolidation. Consumers will pick Coca-Cola over other colas for whatever reason. Even when, if you remember from back in the day, people couldn't even pick original Coke in taste tests over some other sodas. But they do when it matters, at the cash register. Right? They do when it matters. In restaurants, they say, hey, I'll take a Coke. Right? Warren Buffett, of course, was heavily into Coke. Ownership of the stock. Right? Right now, we don't know the winners in the AI space. So there's duplication. So there's aggressive marketing. So there's vendor financing. Right? That's what happens with new groups. Let me close by saying this. Relatively recently, Elon Musk opened up a gigafactory in China. Right? You remember this? And, you thought, oh, wow, Tesla is going to take over China. Right? People thought electric vehicles were new. They didn't equate them to golf carts or what came before. They didn't know that back in the early 1900s there were electric cars. Right? They thought this was new. They thought it addressed pollution concerns. Here was Elon Musk in China. He was about to conquer China with his electric vehicles. Right? Now it's a few years later. Now you have a very vibrant EV market in China that's being served by BYD, by NIO, by other local Chinese brands. In fact, they're exporting EVs to places like Vietnam and Europe. Right? In other words, Tesla didn't win the EV race in China. Right? Tesla now has some major competitors globally who are selling electric vehicles. But of course, Tesla has other product lines, don't they? Right? They have robots, for example. Right? And so, business moves that fast. You think you're at a point where you can pick the winner. You don't understand that there is going to be competition. We don't know until it happens how the public is going to respond to that competition. Right? I can't tell you tonight who wins the AI race. But what I can tell you unequivocally, as someone who uses Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini AI, right, Grok, I can tell you AI is here to stay. And a lot of profits are going to be made. We just don't know by who. The players themselves don't know by who. They're trying to position themselves to get the bounty. But they're also trying to position themselves to survive. Right? So even having a well-funded business partner is not enough. Right? An OpenAI will appreciate the money it received from Microsoft that helped it exist. But it'll also have deals with others for survival reasons and to not be too beholden to any one player in the space. Let me hear from you in the comment section of this YouTube video. I look forward to your comments.